Ever see an airplane in the sky and wonder what makes it fly? Hi, I'm Dave Leake of the William M. Starkle Planetarium at Parkland College. And today we're here at the Chanute Air Museum in Rantoul to talk about the mystery of flight on this edition of Surrounded by Science.
What can your phone do?
Get the ball rolling to a new career with an Eastern Illinois University degree at Parkland College.
Parkland and Eastern really made it work for me.
Now I'm taking Eastern classes on Parkland's campus.
I'm working on my bachelor's degree from Eastern without commuting.
Thanks to Parkland and Eastern, I'm reaching my goals.
For more on Eastern at Parkland, call 217-351-2543.
Taking dual credit in high school pays off when you don't have to take an extra class in college. I love the challenge. I feel great about getting college credit in high school.
We're here at the Chanute Air Museum with curator Mark Hanson. Mark, how are you doing?
Doing well, I did.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. How long, I know we're here at the museum that's at the former Chanute Air Force Base.
Correct.
When did the Air Force Base start here?
The Air Force Base started here in 1917 in response to World War I. They needed somewhere to train pilots.
So big training facility.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I know the base closed not too long ago. When was that?
Right, the base actually closed in 1993, 92, 93.
And then the museum took over roughly when?
The museum opened in, I believe, in May or June of 1994.
Okay,
So
been
shortly
going
thereafter.
ever since.
Yep.
If somebody came up to the Chanute Air Museum, what could they expect to see here?
The biggest draw is the airplanes. We have most of the airplane, a lot of the airplanes that were on static display at Chanute Air Force Base. So everything from a P-51H, B-25, XB-47. But we also have exhibit spaces. Some of the newest are Dreams of Flight, which deals with the history of flight before the Wright brothers. We have a new Chanute Air Force Base timeline, which is basically the history of Chanute in photographs. And one of our other really popular exhibits is the 99th Pursuit Squadron exhibit, which basically tells the story of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, which was the first of the Tuskegee Airmen, which was actually started here in Rantoul at Chanute.
And as far as the big airplanes, I know you've got the big air park outside, and did I see on a billboard this is the largest in the state?
We believe so. One of the larger. We have about 43 aircraft and missiles from military and civilian. So we have a lot of airplanes here.
And for a visitor that would come up here, what kind of access do they have to the aircraft?
Well, because most of the aircraft are on loan from the Air Force, we can't let people in them. However, the way our hangar's set up, you can get pretty up close and personal.
And I believe you also have a large selection of flight simulators?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we have a large collection of simulators primarily made by Frasca in Urbana. We also have a couple others. We have a newish DC-9 simulator that we've actually built so that we can let people in that one if we have a tour guide available. We also have a World War II vintage simulator that was actually here at Chanute.
Interesting. Now you mentioned missiles. Mention a little bit more about the missiles, because did I hear correctly there's like a missile silo here?
Yes, we actually have 4 silo segments. 3 of them are above ground, and one of them is actually below ground. It's an almost full-scale Minuteman missile silo below the surface of the hangar.
And again, all used for training purposes?
Yes, all training purposes. For safety reasons, we can't let people in them, but they're here that people can see what they look like when they were being used.
Wow, interesting. Now your job is as curator. What does a curator do? Probably a little bit of everything.
Right, right. Primarily, I'm responsible for all of the museum stuff. I take care of the collections, library archives. I'm responsible for the exhibits, exhibit upkeep, interpretation, basically anything that's quite museum specific. That's my job.
Okay, and I know today our show is called Surrounded by Science, so we want to look at a little bit of science here in the museum. And I know one thing that always interests me, just when I see a plane go over the house, is how do these things fly? I mean, obviously they're much heavier than air, but yet they somehow generate forces that allow them to stay in the air. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Chanute was actually a technical training base. In other words, it was a school. Shortly after World War I, the base almost closed because it wasn't good weather to train pilots here in the winter. So the mission changed to become a school. So when we look at Chanute's history, we can basically trace wings, propulsion systems, different aircraft morphology, swept wings versus straight wings, because they taught all that here. And so, you know, looking at the history of Chanute, we can actually kind of trace aviation history and the science behind what fueled those changes.
Interesting. Well, I'm hoping we get to take a look maybe at a few different types of wings.
Absolutely.
and maybe even some engines if we can get
Absolutely.
if we can get close.
We can do that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Let's go have a look.
All right. Sounds good.
The way that an airplane has to generate that thrust, of course, is through the engine, and it looks like you have several engines here on display. Why don't you talk a little bit about this one?
Well, this one is a Leake. It's similar to what you'd find in general aviation aircraft today. Four-cylinder. Most of the general aviation engines today are flat. In other words, the cylinders are in a single plane. Relatively small, air-cooled. You can see that by the cylinders have all the fins, and the heads have these fins. And of course, this one doesn't have the propeller, but the propeller would attach up here.
So is this similar to a car engine where you'd have the pistons going in and out this way? And then am I looking at what amounts to spark plugs here?
Exactly. And you'll notice that each cylinder has two spark plugs. And that's because there are basically two ignition systems, primarily a safety feature. So if one goes out, there's another one to hopefully at least get you to the ground. But yeah, so each cylinder has two. It's similar to a car engine, but most automobile engines are liquid cooled. This one is not. It's air cooled, as we talked about the fins. And also most car engines are not in a flat configuration. They're usually you know, a V shape or some other shape, where this one is flat.
And what kind of fuel are we talking about as far as?
To the best of my knowledge, some airplanes can use regular gasoline, but the problem with gasoline is it usually has a lot of moisture in it, and that's not a good thing, especially if you get up to altitude. So a lot of aircraft use 100 low lead or avgas, which is a higher octane, less moisture, and just helps the engines run more safely.
What year are we talking about here as far as this thing comes into
I would
being?
say this one is probably 50s vintage. Leake is still building engines today, and they still look quite similar to this.
Interesting. Now, if we take a step back here, we have something, at least it appears to look a little older.
It's a lot older. Yep.
A lot older.
Yep.
And am I seeing 8 cylinders here?
Yes. This is actually an Asmussen engine. Henry Asmussen was an aviation inventor, pioneer, I guess, who designed engines and airplanes. However, you've probably never heard of Henry Asmussen because his company never really went anywhere. He tried to sell his engines to the military. They were not interested. They were more interested in the Wright brothers' design, engine and airplane. And so he stuck with it, but his engines really never took off. Literally or figuratively. And so this is probably one of the more significant engines we have just because of its rarity. Again,
are these also spark plugs here in the front?
And you'll notice that this only has one spark plug per cylinder, and the heads all bolt on one of the claims to fame to Asmusson's engine was how easily it could be taken apart, reassembled, and repaired. A unique oiler system up top here, which is kind of hidden behind the sign. And I believe this is the magneto up here for the spark plugs.
So propeller would go on my end?
Correct.
Down here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and again, air-cooled. One of the problems that they had with this engine was you'll note that the cylinders are directly in a line. So when this is moving through the air, the cylinders in the back aren't getting as much airflow as the ones in the front. And so there were some cooling problems with some of the rear cylinders.
Hey, Allison and Dylan, what if I told you you could get a head start on college before you graduated high school and for little to no cost?
Well, I'd ask you what the catch is.
Yeah, how can I take college courses if I haven't even finished high school yet?
That's easy. You simply enroll in dual credit courses at Parkland College.
But won't that be expensive?
Yeah, will all the credits transfer?
Well, most four-year universities accept these credits, and you're actually saving money. Many times the high school will even cover the cost of the course.
I'm sorry, did I overhear you guys correctly? Did you just say that you could take college courses without paying college tuition?
Yeah, all we pay for is the course and the textbook, and we can earn college credit towards getting our degree.
You guys are catching on. The credit works toward a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, and even toward career certificate programs.
I like the sound of this.
I don't know, this all sounds great, but I already have a busy schedule and I won't have time to drive to classes.
You won't have to. Parkland offers a number of dual credit courses online, in addition to the on-campus courses. Some of the courses are even taught in your high school.
You mean to say that one of the high school classes I'm taking right now could work as a dual credit course as well?
Yes, you should talk to the school counselor to see which classes are offered as dual credit in our school. Then all you need to do is apply to Parkland, and once you're accepted, fill out the application to the dual credit program. You'll need the signature of your parents and advisor for this.
That sounds easy enough, but are there any requirements to being eligible for dual credit?
Yes, you must be a junior or senior in high school, age 16 or above, in order to be eligible for dual credit courses. You can print an application online or visit Parkland's admissions office to pick one up.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to see the counselor right now.
Yeah, I don't want to miss out on this opportunity.
Me neither.
Right, we're out in the main hangar here at the Chanute Air Museum in Rantoul, and we have a wonderful number of airplanes that are here, but tell us about this particular one, Mark.
This is actually a P-51H. World War II, they flew P-51Ds, so when people think of a P-51, they're thinking about the D model. This is actually a much rarer model, the H model. Same family, but almost a different airplane than the D model.
And briefly, what's the difference between the D and the H? Like, what things did they change to make it a different model of plane?
The H model was the idea was that it would escort bombers in the Pacific during World War II. So it's lighter, less armament, smaller main gear. There's a bunch of other structural changes to basically make it lighter, faster, and with longer legs so it could go farther.
Greater range?
Yep, exactly.
And again, so we were talking about the four forces. I guess we have kind of the main thing here when you think about airplanes, you think about wings. And talk a little bit about the shape of this wing.
Well, the P-51 has a fairly interesting wing. Most wings are very fat on the leading edge to cut more air over the top. This is much thinner. It increases speed, but basically it works the same. It creates lift by airflow going over the top of the wing. And then, of course, we can do things with this wing by changing its shape. So on the back of the wing, we have ailerons and flaps, which help the airplane turn. And then in landing, the flaps come down, actually makes the wing area bigger, pushes more air down, and slows the airplane down so it stalls at a much lower speed.
Would that be called drag?
Yes.
Okay. So we have our aileron here. So what you always see these on planes? What's the purpose of these?
Basically what happens, there's another one on the other side, and when the airplane wants to turn, the stick is moved and this aileron either moves down or it moves up. And basically what that does is when the aileron goes down, it pushes the wing up.
So you kind of get doing one of these, okay. And then of course your flaps down here a little farther.
Yep. And those basically are one direction, they drop straight down. And they basically catch more air and change that wing shape, and that slows the airplane down, but the primary reason is it lowers the stall speed. The stall speed being when the wing stops producing lift. And so when you're landing, you want the wing to continue producing lift at lower speed so you can land safely.
So need to be close to this one of these. When I'm flying my flight simulator, this is my plane of choice.
Yep, there you go.
I know we just looked at the wing of the P-51, but here we have a completely different kind of plane. Can you tell us a little bit about the plane?
Yeah, this is an F-86 Sabre, and it was the first really functional jet fighter for the United States Air Force. Served in the Korean War, went toe-to-toe with the Russian MiGs. This is an early model. This is an A model, so one of the early jet fighters.
Okay, and since we were talking about wing design, I noticed this one's interesting that it's kind of swept back. I know you see that in a lot of our military planes today, so why sweeping backwards like this?
Well, after World War II, the Germans had the Me-262, which was the first truly operational jet fighter in the world. It had straight wings. After World War II, of course, Allied scientists started going over the German airplanes and their design, and they found that the Germans were starting to experiment with swept wings. The 262, I think, had a slightly swept wing, but not as much as this. Because what they found was when the faster an airplane goes, the air builds up on the front, and then when we reach supersonic, it creates a lot of drag and friction. And they discovered if the wings are slightly swept, that helps that air and those shock waves kind of roll off the back of the wing, and it makes the plane go faster.
So you literally have air just not only moving across the wing and under the wing, but literally moving down the wing sometimes?
Yep, it helps cut through that transonic, subsonic, supersonic barrier a little bit better.
Interesting, interesting. Yep. What are wings like this made of?
Aluminum, yep, alloys of aluminum. Keep it light but strong.
Mark, I noticed out here in the hangar you've got a number of aircraft engines. Why does an airplane need an engine?
Well, without an engine, the wing can't produce any lift. The engine is what actually pulls the airplane through the air to get that airflow over the wings.
Okay, and this is an interesting engine. How would you describe this? I assume the propeller would be here on the front?
Yep, the propeller would go here. And this is what's called a radial engine. And basically what that means is all of the cylinders go around the main drive shaft that drives the propeller, as opposed to a flat engine or a liquid-cooled where all the pistons tend to be in a line in a single plane or in a V configuration, but not all the way around. Again, it's air-cooled. We can tell that by the fins. 2 spark plugs per cylinder again.
Okay, so spark plugs are in here?
Yes,
okay.
Spark plugs are in here. And then these are the push rods for the valves.
I see. Okay.
Inside the cylinder.
So I'm assuming there's some sort of firing order for these things?
Yes, there's a specific firing order to basically balance out the engine. Otherwise, you'd have all kinds of vibration if you had, for example, if you tried to have all the cylinders go in a line, the engine would vibrate. And so there's a specific firing order that keeps the engine balanced.
What year, not necessarily for this one, but as far as the radial engine, are we talking 1920s, 30s, 40s?
Radial engines have been around quite a while. Probably their heyday was the 30s and 40s, but folks still use them today.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. A lot of the World War II vintage aircraft used radials. All the bombers, B-17, B-24, B-25, B-29. Some of the fighters, the P-47, we're still using radials.
Interesting.
And one of the nice things about a radial is it's air cooled, so you don't have to worry about a coolant system. Airplanes like the P-51 that were liquid cooled, depending on where they would inflict battle damage, it could end your day real quick if the coolant system was damaged.
Makes sense.
With the radial, they're pretty durable. You know, I've read about entire cylinders being blown away and the engine still runs. So it's a little bit more rugged.
Okay, and then I want to see your engine down here. This is huge. What kind of engine do we have here?
This is an R4360, one of the biggest radials ever built. It is a radial, a little bit different than the other one, where it's a single row. This one has so many cylinders that they actually wrap the cylinders around the crankshaft.
Okay, I can see. So you have one here, then this one's out a little farther, and this one farther still. Okay.
And one of the primary reasons for that is this is, again, is an air-cooled engine. And if we had this many cylinders just wrapped around, the cylinders in the back wouldn't get any airflow. So this configuration allows airflow to kind of get around all of the cylinders a little bit better, rather than having multiple rows of cylinders.
And this is an interesting cutaway because I know you can actually see the the piston rods in there.
Yeah, this is actually a training aid. It was built at Chanute Field, and it was used to train engine mechanics. So they could actually see how everything fits together inside the engine and how everything works together, not just in pieces on the workbench, but actually in place. And of course, without cutting the engine away like this, it's pretty hard to see all this stuff in a assembled engine.
Can we fire it up?
You bet.
And turn that light on too.
And we can see the valves working in there.
Oh yeah. You know, Mark, this looks like a very different kind of engine. What are we looking at here?
This is actually a jet engine. Whereas the other engines we've looked at basically need to turn a propeller to either pull the airplane through the air or push it. This one doesn't have a propeller. It basically uses heated exhaust coming out the back of the engine to push the airplane forward. And basically how that works is air gets sucked into the front of the engine. We have compressor stages which compress the air down and bring it into a series of burner cans. Fuel is injected, it's ignited, and then that compressed air, when it ignites, expands, comes out the back, and that produces the thrust to push the airplane forward.
Okay, so the front of the airplane would be that way, and we have the rear here. So this would be the
exhaust.
The exhaust down this way.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And we can see inside here this little cone that helps kind of direct the exhaust. The blade right here actually is powers some of the other equipment on the engine. So like the carburetors, igniters. So that's actually taking that exhaust and using it to produce other work in the airplane other than just letting all that go out. Runs generators and so forth.
And I know I even teach a little something about something called the Venturi effect, where as this thing narrows, that should increase the flow out of here. It's kind of like taking your finger and putting it over a hose, and then you get the water shooting out a little farther. So it's interesting how that sloped back like this. So when did roughly the jet engine come into being?
The first usable jet engines were used in World War II. But they were very prone to breakdown and didn't last very long. After World War II, I would say in the 50s, was when kind of jet engine technology really kind of caught up and came into being. This engine is from 50s time frame, and it's fairly simple compared to some of the jet engines that we have today.
And again, we obviously have a cutaway here, so training model?
Yes, again, used at Chanute Field to train jet engine mechanics on all the different parts, how they fit together, and how that all works.
Head up to Rantoul and the Chanute Air Museum where you too can be surrounded by science. I'm dressed for it. I think I'm going to take one of these planes up.